Hey guys, Brian Stevens here. I have Dave Stevens, no relation. And today we're going to be talking about a couple of issues that are facing the industry that are very timely. They're topics of discussion that everyone is discussing right now. They are topics that have actually made the national news. So it has gone outside of the borders of the mortgage and real estate industry. Dave's got some very clear thoughts on what's taking place right now and his opinions. And I think a lot of what just came up to me today was you put out an email in response to FHFA Director Sandra Thompson coming out and defending these loan level price adjustments and essentially saying that they're not robbing Peter to pay Paul, that these moves that are going to lower the fees for higher risk profiled borrowers is not coming at the expense of higher credit, higher LTV borrowers. That these are two mutually exclusive moves, which for anybody in the industry looking at it says, oh, come on, that's not true. Can we address this with her first statement? And you did speak about this on your email, and it's located down below for everybody who wants to check it out. She said the updated fees, as was true with prior fees, generally increases as credit scores decrease. The statement also says higher credit score borrowers are not being charged more, so that lower credit score borrowers pay less. Is she expecting us to believe that?
I think so. I think she's definitely expecting folks inside the Beltway who don't know how the ball game is played to believe it. That entire statement, everybody should read that she put out last night. And look, I'm a fan of the director generally, and I supported her being nominated and confirmed into that role. That statement is filled with so many inaccuracies and conflicting points that it's I don't even know where to start. Let's start with the quote you just made. If you look at how the pricing was done, they dropped, and I sent you a heat map. Hopefully it's going to be on the website. If you look at all the green zones, everything there was a price improvement. It's almost all in the bottom right side of the LLPA matrix, which is really means people with lower credit scores and lower down payments got significant reductions in some cases. In fact, for the lowest cells, it was 175 basis point reduction. They literally cut it in half. From 350 basis points down to 175. And the question is, how do they afford that? How do they pay for that? Clearly, she didn't all of a sudden say these are just, they don't have the credit risks we thought they did once upon a time. Yeah. No, they raised pricing on a whole bunch of cells, particularly above 700 FICOs at loan to value somewhere around 75 to 80-ish, even to 85. They got some pretty significant increases. In fact, 75 to 79 got a 75 basis point increase in fee. And so, she's trying to say, these are just independent decisions, and we didn't raise them on better creditworthy borrowers to subsidize lower creditworthy borrowers. But then elsewhere in the same statement yesterday, she goes on to say, we did change fees on second homes and other programs, which helps compensate for the lower fees given to these borrowers. So she admits in her own statement that they did some cross compensation. She just doesn't want us to think, nothing to see here in the grid. I'm sorry, I just don't buy it. I actually wish she had just admitted, yes, we want to lower prices for borrowers who normally don't get a GSE loan. They usually go to the FHA or something else due to price. When they can, we wanted to make it cheaper for them, but I had to pay for it somewhere because I can't dilute the capital of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. I have an obligation, fiduciary obligation, as the director of the FHFA, that I'm going to raise fees elsewhere. And I would defend it because this is part of the mission. If she had said that, it would have been accurate and understandable. But what she's trying to do is do the shell game and tell us there's nothing to see there, when in reality is. One thing I'd say in this, Brian, just, and for all of you who are in the business, you're all like, why did this all of a sudden flare up and what's really the big deal? This policy was announced in February. It goes into effect May 1, but you've already started pricing this in a couple months ago because it has to do with deliveries starting May 1. And they delayed the 40 DTI, which was the bigger part of the problem. I view this as a question about the forest through the trees. So if you just stare at the trees, you go, yeah, there's some fee adjustments. Look, I can't fight City Hall. I got to continue doing my business. They're not, going to crush the industry. We have enough problems. So why are we making a big stink about it? And that's really looking at the trees. I'm looking at the forest here and saying the FHFA is changing the landscape of what they can do to tinker with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, these two quasi-private companies who have shareholders and boards of directors, bill while they're in conservatorship and use them for social policy objectives. And so, my view is we should resist all tinkering with pricing at the GSEs unless it's clearly associated with risk. I've advocated for that ever since my days at the Mortgage Bankers Association. And that's why I'm fighting back. Why did it suddenly blow up? The New York Post started writing a story on this a few weeks ago, and they interviewed me and a couple other folks. And the article came out, and suddenly that caught on fire. Washington Examiner or the Examiner wrote on it. Next thing you know, I'm getting called from Fox. I did 2 different broadcasts on Fox Television, and I did Squawk Box on CNBC on the subject. Newsweek put out a story on it, interviewing me and several other folks, on and on and on. And now there are other stories. A new one came out today with Cliff Rossi, who's a well-known academic in the housing policy space, and who I worked with at Freddie Mac years ago. So look, I just, I blew up at a weird time and suddenly got all this interest. There are some misstatements. Yes, people with lower FICO scores, even at 175 basis points, even with it being dropped by 175 basis points, that's still the highest fee on the grid. So they still pay more than better creditworthy clients. But in a relative sense, we raise pricing on better credit quality borrowers to subsidize lower pricing on worse credit quality borrowers. She even says in that statement, Brian, that you have posted, that this isn't about credit score, it's about income. I'm like, have you ever looked at an LLPA matrix? The LLPA matrix has credit scores on one side, LTVs on the other. There's no income limit at all in the LLPA matrix. It's all about credit score and LTV on how those 81 cells in that grid adjust pricing for potential borrowers. So yeah, I think it's a funny political move, and the defense around it is even more politicized on their side than I think what the business folks have been pushing back against using actual data and numbers.
So there are a couple of things here. The first question I have is my viewers are going to hate this, but I actually believe in subsidizing. I with my healthcare, I know that I pay a premium for healthcare for me and my family, and I know that what it's doing is it's offsetting the cost for folks who are on the lower socioeconomic rungs. I get that it's a tax of sorts. I'm not entirely opposed to the idea behind this. I guess my question is, if rather than the hoodwink approach, if they would have come out and just said, if Sandra would have come out and just said, this is what we're doing. We need to make it more affordable for folks in who are underserved communities and different grids around the country, need to have a break in their pricing in order to realize home ownership. Would you have gone along with this?
I probably wouldn't have. So look, I'm a big proponent of affordable lending and advancing mortgage opportunity for minorities in particular. The problem is, if you look at the construct of the pricing, the Urban Institute has a great, I'll send the chart to you afterwards, but the Urban Institute is a think tank in Washington. They have a housing policy center, and every month they put out a chart book, and it's nothing but a whole deck of really interesting data about our industry, always fresh. This last month they put out a comparison between Fannie Mae execution and FHA execution across various FICO bands at 95% loan to value loan. And they included the 30 basis point MIP reduction that FHA put in place, and they included the new LLPA structure that FHFA as effective May 1. FHA is still cheaper, man. I mean, if you're below 720 FICO score with a 5% down payment, FHA mortgages are cheaper. And so all of this pricing convolution that's going on here really won't be effective, except in one instance. Two, really. Loan limits are different with the GSEs, so maybe that'll sweep in a borrower or two, although typically in those lower FICO bands at those higher LTVs, you're probably not going to be on the high GSE loan limits. But let's just hold that aside. And the second is that, unfortunately, in our business, which Brian, you know all too well, and all the loan officers out here know, there's a lot of real estate agents that don't want to take an FHA contract on a purchase deal, especially in hot markets. And so, maybe that makes a Freddie Fannie loan an alternative just to get the contract accepted in a home purchase. But aside from that, they really did nothing to improve pricing. I believe the GSEs should create products targeted to affordable lending, and as such, then they should just raise base guarantee fees by a couple basis points to cover the expense. Fannie Mae has My Community Home. Freddie Mac has Home Possible. They've both had affordable housing goals going back through the decades. Even when I ran Freddie Mac's single family business many moons ago, we had affordable housing goals that targeted census tract, low area median income levels, minority applicants, and more to try to get and we had to meet specific targets by percentages of our business and of our mix, and meet the affordable housing goals that were put upon us. And that went into a report to Congress, and we were subject to penalties if we didn't meet it. That's an explicit subsidy. A lot of people suggested here, rather than convolute LLPAs, I'll explain why it's really important in this secondary market, but rather than convolute LLPAs, just raise G fees 2 bips. We figured it's about 1.5 bips, 1.5 basis points on G fees across the board would have created the same liquidity subsidy that could then be used to targeted home buyers that lenders could distribute. They could be given buckets of cash, literally in a fund that they could draw from to subsidize mortgage rates. The problem that's happening is it's now beginning to raise questions on the capital market side about the integrity of the mortgage-backed securities market, because this move was small. But if you start moving coupons, enough to move coupons, then you're messing with convexity. You're messing with duration expectations, prepayment speed durations. And so there's just a real concern about the integrity of what Fannie and Freddie do to price their mortgages, because that MBS, the liquidity of that mortgage-backed security and having a strong investor appetite for them is absolutely paramount. We have the FHA that does far better in the African-American community and the Hispanic community. Half of FHA's purchased loans last year were to minority borrowers. Half. Now, the GSEs only had 8% of their loans go to African-American. The GSEs are dismal in performing here. The FHA really does well. I get wanting to improve GSE performance. I just think this construct is not the way to do it, because it puts in place the opportunity for future directors who come in under different regimes, because it's now a politicized role. It's at the will of the president. It means they can tinker with Fannie and Freddie for their own political outcomes, just like we saw with Calabria in a bad way, and now we're seeing today with Director Thompson, and who knows who comes next. We can't allow the GSEs to be whittled down in that fashion. There's other ways to get there.
Yeah, it really kind of, if we have different administrations coming in, there would be a whimsical nature of whatever the policies are, and it would swing far left and it could swing far right. The insanity in this thing that it really perplexes me is we're looking at the graph right now. Now, to illustrate this, check out the graph in the bottom right-hand corner. That is your highest risk borrower for our loan level price adjustments. Now, that is the lowest credit score and the highest LTV. In the upper left-hand corner, that is the lowest risk profile of a borrower with the highest credit scores and the lowest LTV. Now, if you were to draw a line from the bottom right-hand corner and go straight up to the top left-hand corner, that's going to give you an idea of going from worst to best, right through the middle. Now, here's what you guys need to understand. The darker the green it gets, the higher the risk profile, but the better the pricing gets. The darker the red it gets, the worse the pricing gets. And as we're moving up the scale, it becomes the darkest right around the middle when you're looking at somebody with a 720 to 730 score. You notice down at the bottom right-hand corner, that's the darkest color green. The worst credit profile has the biggest reduction in loan level price adjustments. In fact, if you were to have a slightly higher score and a slightly larger down payment, your cost would actually go up, because you wouldn't get as much of a break as you're getting with a lower credit score. This perfectly illustrates rewarding those with higher risk and punishing those that are lower risk. I think it's very, very easy to see here. This flies in the face of any logic that I've ever been taught in my 25 years of doing the mortgage in the mortgage industry. It makes me wonder, what's the motive behind this? Is it strictly political? Do they understand that this flies in the face of logic, that the industry is going to look at this negatively, that if the mainstream media looks at this, they're going to look at this negatively? Like, what's the end game, and what precipitated this taking place? What's the motive?
I don't know exactly, because I don't believe the FHFA is being transparent. I think that whole statement that was put out last night is clearly shows that they are trying to I would say, pull the wool over our eyes or get us to believe something that literally is not true. And so, in the end of the day, what I believe is this. I believe that Director Thompson got frustrated with Fannie and Freddie's response to coming up with fair housing plans, which she directed them both to do, that it didn't go far enough. And I believe she stepped in and said, look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to juice the pricing for that block of home buyers that are likely have a greater concentration of minority purchase applicants. And that's an unfortunate reality, but if you look at average credit scores among certain ethnicities, the African-American community and the Latino community in particular, on average, have lower credit scores than white non-Hispanic. And it's not a reflection on the community. It's a reflection on not understanding financial literacy and what it takes to get a good credit score, growing up in a family where maybe your parents weren't, well banked and didn't have good credit, so it didn't pass on to you. Coming from Central America, perhaps, and your family didn't even trust the banking system, so they do everything in cash, and you just never learned that you need 3 credit cards and you need to have them for this period of time and pay off your balances and things of this sort. But the reality is, we have a huge delta. The home ownership rates for African Americans and Hispanics is in the mid 40s in this country. The home ownership for white non-Hispanic in this country right now stands at about 73%. The overall home ownership rate's around 64 to 65%. We've got to do better in bringing up the numbers in the African American and Hispanic community, because if we don't, guys, our whole industry is going to shrink, because 2/3 of all household formation is minority right now. And we've got to start closing that gap. Now, there are reasons for it. There's age-related issues. The Latino community, Hispanic community in the United States is just younger than the white non-Hispanic community. There are those kinds of things. There's real wage and labor differences, things of that sort. But nevertheless, we've got to solve this. The problem I've got with what FHFA is doing here is they're doing nothing strategic, right? That was a very tactical move. A strategic move would be for Secretary Fudge, Sandra Thompson, our head of the FHA, Ginny May, members of the White House, hold a summit in Washington, inviting all the best policy minds from mayor's offices across the country, from industry, from public policy advocates around housing, spend a week literally breaking down what's the problem in advancing housing. They would come up with lack of affordable, available housing inventory. They would come up with looking at credit in different ways, thinking about, especially for the self-employed, how to evaluate them differently to maybe open up the door a bit more for them. Down payment assistance programs, all of these things that could be part of a solution package. But that's not happening. There's no strategic discussion going on here. This is Director Thompson arbitrarily and tactically, not strategically, adjusting a bunch of fees on a grid that I don't think she really understands what that does over the long term and what the precedent that she's making by doing it.
It feels very political to me because as far as I can see, and I think we've actually talked about this before, this is kind of a case, it's a moot point. It's fishing for minnows off the back of a whale, because we can go ahead and lower the costs for higher risk profile borrowers, those who tend to be on the lower socioeconomic rungs, underserved communities oftentimes. They can't afford an entry-level house to start with. And as I've said before, if I can't afford a ticket to the concert, I don't care what band is playing. It just doesn't matter to me.
Right.
The only ones that this is really going to affect are people who are currently buying houses using Fannie and Freddie. It seems to me that the conversation that should take place should be about providing affordable housing, and then find back into the products that would go ahead and support responsible home ownership. But if we have the average sales price for a house is $440,000 right now, if you're making $30,000 a year, none of this pricing matrix is going to amount to a hill of beans. Is this going to move is this going to move the needle at all? All right, so we've reduced some of the pricing. Does this move the needle, and do we start to help underserved communities, or is this strictly political at this point?
It's an interesting point, and I agree with a lot of the points you were making. Good analogies there, Brian. But someone emailed me today, a top executive in the industry, and said we should have a discussion about how we've politicized the director roles of the FHFA and the Bureau. And I thought that was interesting, because the comment, this was from a very conservative, strong Republican. He said, maybe we did the wrong thing here by challenging these appointments and making them at the will of the president. Because now what we've done is we've created very politicized rules. So whether it's Chopra at the Bureau, or currently the current director, Sandra Thompson at the FHFA, they lean a certain direction politically. Just like in the last regime, we had Kathy Kraninger and we had Mark Calabria. They leaned a different way. And so we may find ourselves subject to a whipsawing effect that could go on to various regime changes, when really what I think all we want as an industry, this isn't politics. I mean, housing finance is apolitical. We want dependency. We want rules we can trust without a lot of gotchas going on along the way. And because of those Supreme Court rulings, we actually, it seemed, I agreed with this executive's comments to me, we've turned these into political rules, and that's what we're dealing with today.
Wow. Well, hey, listen, we're going a little long here today, guys. The articles are down below. The downloads on Dave's email are also down below. We have a 3 matrix that you might want to check out, including the one that we showed here today. Make sure that you go to Dave's site. Where can people follow you at, Dave?
You just LinkedIn. That's where people can see. I write articles on LinkedIn, et cetera, and I publish stuff on HousingWire. I don't have a website, so
good for you.
That's where you'll find me the most.
I want to grow up to be like you one day. Hey,
well, I do have a podcast on this subject on HousingWire. It's put up today. Today is Wednesday. So yeah, I mean, that's also available.
Hey guys, all of the appropriate links are down below. So just make sure you check it out. Just get tuned into what Dave talks about. I get your emails with, some of your opinion pieces that you're putting out there. They're always very, very illuminating. They give great insight to the industry. And to be a true professional, as a real estate agent or lender, anybody who occupies a similar space, you need to be up to speed with what the current topics are, the current policies are. That's being a professional. So make sure you follow everything Dave is doing. And once again, I appreciate your time, and I hope Charlie's okay.
My dog. Yeah, sorry. That's the nature of Zoom from home.
Hey, it's all good, man. Dogs are great. We have a dog in our office right now. We have one every day, so it's all good. All right, you have a great day, Dave. Thank you so much.
You too.
All right, bye. First of all, thanks for watching, and thank you for being supporters of the National Real Estate Post. I'd like to ask you, if you appreciate the content that we're giving you and you feel it's valuable for you and your business, do us a favor and keep the conversation going by sharing and forwarding this show to folks that you know in real estate and lending. It helps us with our goals and objectives, and I hope that it helps you with your goals and objectives as well. With that said, realtors, lenders, and everybody else in the real estate family, happy selling today. Thank you very much.